it has to be the best performance ever, so that the audience really enjoys, and that only works if the musicians really enjoy. So basically it's making them comfortable, and then my part of making them comfortable is making them sound good, so they can hear each other and the audience can hear everything really well. It is a pleasant sound, and the message comes across. That's the whole point. They have a story to tell, song to play, and there's something behind it, and I want it to come across to the audience. And then my part that I really like myself is putting all the microphones and effects and balancing, but usually I don't bother the musicians with that. They just want to sound good, and I like playing around with microphones and all kinds of things to experiment to make it better. I think it's essential to have knowledge in music. I know there's quite a few engineers. Actually, usually the older engineers that never went to any schooling, the self-taught ones. They can be very only technical. They know all about electronics. They know about how to connect things. I like to know that too. I want to know that too. But I think very essential part is to know the music, because that helps communicating with the musicians, and that also helps to bring the message across from what the composer and the musicians, the story they want to tell. If I understand the music, I think it helps it. And I notice I work a lot also with different cultures, like now with the gamelan. I'm not that much used to it, but I did work with it several times. Last 15 years, I think. And also many other different cultures. I worked with a Cambodian group, and that's again totally different from a gamelan. We in the West might think, oh, it's just the same. Well, it's definitely not. And with every instrument, I try to listen, have them play, and just try to figure out like what's the essence of that instrument and of that music. And there's often very different ideals, the ideal sound. Like what we in the West think is a perfect sound definitely doesn't apply to a gamelan or to it. There's just you listen differently, and apart from that being very interesting, it's also very helpful. You don't go in the wrong direction. You don't want to make a gamelan sound like a string quartet. Well, if that ever were possible. Very often it's just that you have to deal with whatever microphone you have available. But now I have quite a collection of all different kinds of microphones. I like to start with what everyone does. So everyone has like, oh, for a kick drum you do this, and for a violin you do this. And I always start there because they must be doing it for a reason. But I want to also then fully understand the reason. So very often I put 2 microphones or 3 microphones, different ones, next to each other, and just compare. And then I look for, is it brighter, is it darker, is it more sometimes if there's a lot of crosstalk from other instruments, that's then a very important factor, that you maybe don't choose the best sounding microphone for that instrument, but it's cleaner because you have less crosstalk, depending on if it's recording or for amplification. For amplification, you usually need a cleaner sound and you're closer to the instrument then. So that, then you choose different microphones. And I like just having a lot of options. Also when recording, I don't think I ever put 1 microphone, always 2 different ones. So you have different flavors to later on choose from. Sometimes there's no difference. That really depends. Like for instance, for the recorder and the pan flute, I often use what many people use for vocal mic. It's a SM57 or Beta 57. You can also use it for vocals, and I don't really make the difference. I don't see I also experiment. I put up different microphones and choose the one I like best, and they definitely can be instrument microphones. And I prefer to not see that difference. Just be open to any option. That's also, I often start with what most people do if they use a condenser or a dynamic, but then I experiment and do different things. I found, condenser microphones, they have much more detail. Usually that's a good thing, But I also found in some situations, when you're maybe outside and it's very windy, they're super sensitive to wind. Even you can protect it and put things around it. Even then, I had situations where it was almost a storm. And then dynamic microphones can be a better choice because they are a little bit less sensitive. I also like using ribbon microphones a lot, but they're also very sensitive, very big. I do a lot of live recordings, and the halls where I work, they really don't want to see microphones. It's really no microphone stands, no cables. And then, well, yeah, obviously I have to use them. But if I use smaller microphones, they're usually more happy than when I use bigger ones. So I can use the ribbon microphones, but typically they're big. So then probably instruments that are a bit further at the back for recordings. But they have a special sound that I often like, but also sometimes not. I've used it on a piano and I really didn't like it. There I use condenser microphones, and if possible omnidirectional ones, because then if it's a nice instrument in a nice room, you capture also some of the room, and I'm happy with that. But if not, then I use more directional ones to get rid of a bit of the room acoustics if it's not ideal. Oh, it's often, it's actually, there's many stupid reasons why to use them. If your client sees that you have very expensive microphones and they recognize it, they're happy. If you have maybe a similar sounding microphone that's some cheap brand or a brand they don't know, so that helps. It just makes people feel happy, and that's always good because my goal is to have everyone happy. Often it's reliability. Usually with the more expensive microphones, they are more reliable, more durable, they break less easy. Not always, but you can trust them a bit more maybe. But I've also had cheap microphones that don't break. So that's a reason. What I found is that also most microphones, except like the ribbons, they have a special flavor, but most condenser microphones and most dynamic microphones, if you measure them from the front, they have a linear frequency response, pretty much. Maybe 1 dB on or off, but really doesn't make any difference. That would be the same difference as moving the microphone a few centimeters to the left or to the right, that kind of difference. So that's not why they sound different, because they do sound differently. And it's very often what comes from the side. If there's sound coming from the side, then quite often the better, the more expensive microphones sound more natural. So that can be a reason to choose that. But in the end, I want every possible microphone because there's a use for any microphone. Yes, I've experimented with the first miniature microphone. Peter Heijn, a person we know, gave them to me and said, "Oh, you go experiment with them." So of course I did, and I was very happily surprised. It was really, really interesting. But I had to give them back to him. It was a bit of, he wanted them back. Yeah. To experiment a lot more, just put them next to other microphones that I know. Now we're using them for the recorder and for the pan flute and actually pretty much everything. I listened to the miniature one on the Habab. I was really impressed, really interesting sound. But I was using headphones, and so I really want to listen to it on speakers and see or listen to what it sounds. And I think also what's very important, if you handle it yourself, you move the microphone. What I do a lot is just putting on headphones and then moving the microphones around and just see how they respond, how they interact with the instrument. And I would really like to do that more.